Millionaire laughed at him for riding a bike to work. 1 second later, he saved his life. Michael Johnson had lost everything over the past 2 years: his steady job, his car, his home, and even the dignity he once carried while walking the streets of New York. Now he pedaled his old bicycle every day to reach the hospital, where he worked as a nursing assistant, carrying not just a backpack with his uniform, but also the weight of overdue bills and his sick daughter at home. It was on a cold January morning, when the traffic light on Fifth Avenue turned red, that his life crossed paths with Richard Blackwood's. The millionaire businessman was in the back seat of his black limousine when he spotted Michael stopped beside him, panting after climbing the steep hill. Without a second thought, Richard rolled down the window and let out a cruel laugh that echoed down the busy avenue. "Look at this pathetic sight," Richard said, pointing directly at Michael. "People like this should walk instead of clogging up traffic. How embarrassing, my God." Michael felt his face burn with shame. Some pedestrians stopped to stare, whispering among themselves. He just lowered his head, gripped the handlebars tighter, and waited for the light to turn green. He didn't have the strength for a fight right then. His daughter Emily needed him whole, focused, working. The light changed, and Michael started pedaling slowly, still feeling the businessman's mocking gaze burning into his back. But when he had gone just a few feet, he heard a strange noise coming from the limousine. He turned and saw something that made him forget the humiliation he'd suffered seconds before. Richard Blackwood was having violent seizures inside the car. His body thrashed uncontrollably on the leather seat, while the driver, completely panicked, screamed his name, unsure what to do. The man behind the wheel was frozen in fear, unable to react. Michael didn't hesitate for a second. He dropped his bike in the middle of the street and ran back to the limousine. His hands trembled, but his mind was completely focused. He'd seen this kind of episode before when he cared for his father in his final months. He knew exactly what to do. "Open the door now," he shouted at the driver, who obeyed immediately. Michael climbed into the car and held Richard firmly, positioning him on his side to prevent injury. He checked his breathing, controlled the jerking movements, and began speaking in a calm, steady voice even as his heart raced. "Easy, it'll pass. Breathe slowly. You're okay," he repeated, using techniques he'd learned not from nursing textbooks, but from the harsh reality of caring for someone gravely ill. After what felt like hours but was only minutes, Richard began to calm. His breathing steadied, his muscles relaxed, and he opened his eyes, still dazed and disoriented. Michael stayed by his side, checking his vitals and making sure everything was under control. What happened?" Richard murmured, trying to sit up. "You had a seizure," Michael explained, still holding the businessman's wrists to monitor his pulse. "You need to go to the hospital for tests." Then Michael noticed something strange. On the car floor was an open pill box. He picked it up and examined the tablets. His expression changed completely. "Sir, are you taking these medications?" he asked, showing the box. "Yes, every day. My doctor prescribed them for my blood pressure." Michael shook his head, concerned. Those weren't blood pressure pills, they were strong psychiatric medications, completely unsuitable for someone without mental health issues. The dosage was wrong, the combination dangerous. "Sir, these drugs are causing your seizures." "This isn't blood pressure medication. Someone's been giving you the wrong meds for a long time," explained Michael, feeling a chill run down his spine. Richard fell silent, processing the information. The driver, who had overheard everything, glanced in the rearview mirror with a look of pure shock. How was this possible? Who would be switching the boss's medication? Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers a lot. Now continuing. In the days that followed, Richard Blackwood couldn't get Michael out of his head. The businessman had gone to the doctor and confirmed what the nursing technician had said. Someone was deliberately swapping his medication. But who and why? Driven by a mix of gratitude and curiosity, Richard began discreetly following the man who had saved his life. He discovered Michael worked at 3 different places: the public hospital in the morning, a private clinic in the afternoon, and a health center at night. Between shifts, he still volunteered at a nursing home. What impressed Richard most was Michael's dedication. Even exhausted, He treated every patient with warmth and attention. He never showed impatience or irritation, even in tough situations. He was respected by all his colleagues and loved by the elderly patients. One afternoon, Richard decided to dig deeper into the man's life. He hired a private investigator to uncover details about Michael Johnson. The report he received left him deeply unsettled. Michael had been a widower for 3 years. His wife had passed after a long battle with cancer, leaving him alone to care for their daughter Emily, now 15, who suffered from a rare illness requiring expensive, ongoing treatment. All 3 of Michael's salaries weren't enough to cover the girl's medical bills. The man had sold everything he owned to pay for treatments: the house, the car, even his wedding ring. Now he lived in a small rented apartment in Queens and used a bike to get around because he couldn't even afford bus fare. But the report revealed something even more surprising. Elizabeth Blackwood, Richard's wife, had been saved by Michael years earlier during a medical emergency at the hospital. She'd suffered a heart attack during a routine checkup, and Michael had been the first to respond, saving her life before the doctors arrived. When Richard confronted Elizabeth about it, she confirmed everything with tears in her eyes. "That man saved my life, Richard. I never forgot his face. When you described the nursing technician who helped you, I knew immediately it was the same person," Elizabeth said, emotional. "How could you humiliate someone so special?" Richard felt deeply ashamed. He decided he had to make things right. The next day, he showed up at the hospital where Michael worked with what he believed was an irresistible offer. "Michael, I want you to come work for me as a private nurse. I'll pay you 10 times what you make here," Richard said, expecting gratitude. To his surprise, Michael politely declined. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Blackwood, but my place is here. These people need me, and I need them too," Michael replied, continuing to arrange the meds on his tray. "But you could give your daughter a better life," Richard insisted. "My daughter doesn't need luxury, sir. She needs a father who's proud of what he does and can look her in the eye without shame. My work here gives me that." Richard left the hospital confused and irritated. How could anyone refuse such a generous offer? That made no sense in his worldview, where everything could be bought with money. Over the following weeks, Richard began subtly pressuring the hospitals where Michael worked. Using his connections and influence, he managed to get one of the facilities to cut costs and lay off some staff. Michael was one of those let go, officially due to administrative restructuring. Even so, Michael didn't seek out Richard. He continued working his other 2 jobs and increased his volunteer work to make up for the lost income. But the situation at home was becoming desperate. Emily needed a special medication that cost nearly $2,000 a month, and now Michael could no longer afford it. It was Elizabeth who discovered what her husband had done. During a conversation with a doctor friend, she learned about the pressures at the hospitals and connected the dots. She confronted Richard that same night. "You're a monster!" Elizabeth shouted with a fury Richard had never seen before. "That man saved our lives and you're destroying his. I just wanted him to accept my offer," Richard defended himself. "I'm trying to help him." "You're not helping anyone. You're being selfish and cruel, just like you've always been," Elizabeth shot back. "If you don't undo this immediately, I'm leaving this house and never coming back." Elizabeth's threat shook Richard deeply. For the first time in years, he saw his wife fully determined to end their marriage. He realized he had gone too far and needed to find a way to fix the situation. The next day, he appeared again at the hospital where Michael still worked. This time, his approach was different. "Michael, I need to talk to you. I know I was responsible for you losing your job at Mercy General Hospital," Richard confessed. "I did something terrible, and I want to make it right." Michael stopped writing on the chart and looked Richard directly in the eyes. He showed no anger or surprise, only deep sadness. "Why did you do that, Mr. Blackwood?" he asked wearily. "Because I'm a man used to getting everything I want, and I didn't know how to handle your refusal," Richard admitted. "But now I understand I was wrong, very wrong." Michael took a deep breath. Emily's condition was deteriorating, and he truly needed the money. Against all his principles, he decided to accept the job offer as a private nurse, but only part-time so he could continue helping at the hospital. "All right, Mr. Blackwood, "I'll accept your proposal, but with some conditions," Michael said. "I'll work only part-time for you, and the other half of the day I'll stay here at the hospital, and I want everything in writing with guarantees." Richard agreed immediately, relieved that Michael had accepted, but he had no idea he was about to uncover much darker secrets within his own home. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. In his first week working at the Blackwood mansion, Michael noticed strange things. Richard still showed signs of mental confusion and slight tremors, even after stopping the wrong medications. There was something more going on in that house, something beyond the initial medication mix-up. The mansion was imposing, located in the Upper East Side, with perfectly manicured gardens and quiet staff who seemed to walk on tiptoes. Michael quickly sensed tension in the air, a heavy atmosphere he couldn't quite place. Elizabeth Blackwood was extremely kind to Michael, always asking about Emily and offering help. She was an elegant woman of about 55, a retired doctor who had dedicated her entire life to her family after marrying. She showed genuine concern for her husband and gratitude that Michael was caring for him. But it was Nathan Blackwood, the couple's only son, who caught Michael's attention from their very first meeting. The 28-year-old displayed thinly veiled hostility whenever Michael was around. He avoided direct conversations and seemed to watch every move the nurse made with suspicion. By the second week, Michael began noticing a disturbing pattern. Whenever Nathan visited his father in the mansion's office, Richard would experience episodes of confusion and disorientation in the following hours. The symptoms weren't as severe as his previous seizures, but they were consistent enough to raise suspicions. One afternoon, as Michael was organizing Richard's medications, Nathan startled him by entering the room without knocking. "Nurse, I need to speak with you," Nathan said, closing the door behind him. "Of course, Mr. Nathan. How can I help you?" Michael replied, keeping his tone professional. Nathan was silent for a few seconds, studying Michael's face. There was something unsettling in his eyes, a coldness that contrasted with his youthful appearance. "My father has been sick for a long time. Sicker than you realize," Nathan finally said. "He has moments of clarity, but also periods of complete mental confusion. He's starting to make dangerous business decisions." Michael listened quietly, trying to understand where Nathan was going with this. "The family is worried about the company's future. If my father keeps making poor decisions, hundreds of employees could lose their jobs," Nathan continued. "Do you understand what I'm saying? Mr. Nathan, your father may have occasional episodes of confusion, but overall, his mental faculties are intact," Michael replied carefully. "His symptoms are manageable with the right treatment." Nathan's face twisted into a barely contained scowl. "You've been here 2 weeks and think you know my father better than I do, after living with him for 28 years, Nathan shot back, raising his voice slightly. "That's not what I meant, Mr. Nathan. I'm only sharing my professional observations," Michael said, staying calm. Nathan stepped closer, invading Michael's personal space in an intimidating way. "Listen carefully, nurse. My family is going through a delicate time. It would be very easy for someone to influence my father's decisions, taking advantage of his vulnerable state," Nathan said with a threatening edge. "I expect you to remember that your role here is strictly medical, nothing more." A chill ran down Michael's spine. There was something very wrong about this conversation, but he couldn't quite pinpoint what. He decided to change the subject. "Of course, Mr. Nathan. May I ask who your father's primary physician is? I'd like to consult with them about his treatment." The question caught Nathan off guard. He hesitated before answering. "My father, he doesn't like doctors, prefers to be treated at home," Nathan said, avoiding Michael's gaze. "That's why we hired you." Michael found the answer odd. Richard seemed like a rational man, not the type to avoid proper medical care, but he chose not to press the matter for now. In the following days, Michael began paying closer attention to the mansion's routines. He noticed Nathan had unrestricted access to his father's medications and often entered the room while Richard was resting. He also observed that Richard's episodes of confusion always followed his son's visits. It was during one of these observations that Michael witnessed something that completely changed his understanding of the situation. It was a Thursday afternoon when Michael needed to return to the mansion to retrieve a medical report he had forgotten. Using the key Elizabeth had given him for emergencies, he entered quietly through the back door to avoid disturbing anyone. As he passed through the hallway leading to Richard's office, he heard raised voices coming from the room. He immediately recognized Nathan's voice, but there was something different in his tone, an aggression Michael had never witnessed before. "Dad, you need to sign these documents today. You can't keep delaying the company's decisions," Nathan said firmly. "Son, I've told you I need to read everything carefully. These contracts involve millions of dollars," Richard replied, his voice weary. "You're not in any condition to evaluate complex contracts. You're sick, confused, on medication that affects your judgment," Nathan shot back. "Trust me, I've studied every detail." Michael moved closer to the slightly open door and caught a glimpse of the scene. Richard was seated in the leather armchair, looking frail and disoriented. Nathan stood beside him, holding some papers and a pen. "I don't understand why you're so insistent about this, Nathan," Richard said, rubbing his forehead. "I'm feeling confused again." That's when Michael saw something that shocked him to his core. Nathan stepped toward a tray on the table and discreetly slipped something into a glass of water beside Richard. The movement was quick and calculated, clearly rehearsed. "Have some water, Dad, it'll help," Nathan said, offering the glass. Michael felt his blood run cold. Nathan was drugging his own father. He was the one causing Richard's episodes of confusion, likely to manipulate him into signing important documents. Richard drank the water without suspicion. Within minutes, he began showing signs of drowsiness and disorientation. "Now, Dad, let's sign these papers and settle everything at once," Nathan said, placing the documents in front of Richard. Michael had to leave before he was discovered. His mind raced frantically, trying to process what he had just witnessed. Nathan wasn't just switching his father's medication, he was deliberately poisoning him to force business decisions in his favor. But Michael faced a terrible moral dilemma. If he exposed Nathan, he could lose his job, and with it the only income that allowed him to care for Emily. On the other hand, he couldn't stand by and do nothing about what was happening to Richard. That night, Michael barely slept. Emily noticed something was wrong. "Dad, are you worried about something?" the girl asked, lying in the small bed they shared in their apartment. "Just work, sweetheart. Nothing for you to worry about," Michael replied, trying to hide his distress. "You always taught me that doing the right thing is more important than doing the easy thing," Emily said with the premature wisdom her illness had given her. "If someone's doing something wrong and you can stop it, you shouldn't stay quiet, right?" His daughter's words hit Michael like a punch to the gut. She was right, as always. No matter the personal consequences, he couldn't let Nathan keep poisoning his own father. The next day, Michael decided to confront Nathan directly. He waited for a moment when they were alone in the mansion and knocked on the young man's bedroom door. "Mr. Nathan, I need to speak with you about something very serious," Michael said, stepping into the elegantly decorated room. "What is it, nurse?" Nathan asked, not looking up from his laptop. "I know what you're doing to your father," Michael said bluntly. Nathan finally looked at Michael, and for a few seconds, silence filled the room. The young man slowly closed his laptop and stood up from his chair. "What are you talking about?" asked Nathan, but his voice betrayed that he knew exactly what Michael was referring to. "I saw you putting something in your father's water yesterday afternoon. I saw how confused he became right after. I know you're drugging him to force him to sign documents," said Michael, keeping his voice steady despite his nerves. Nathan stayed silent for long seconds, studying Michael. When he finally spoke, his voice was completely different, cold, calculating, dangerous. "You don't understand anything about this family, nurse," said Nathan, stepping closer to Michael. "My father is truly ill. He's making decisions that could destroy the company my grandfather built with so much sacrifice." "That doesn't justify poisoning him," Michael shot back. "I'm not poisoning anyone," Nathan shouted, losing control. "I'm using mild sedatives to calm him during moments of agitation. It's a standard medical procedure." "Mr. Nathan, I've worked in healthcare for 15 years. I know the difference between medical treatment and deliberate poisoning, Michael said firmly. What you're doing is wrong and dangerous. Nathan completely changed tactics. His expression became pleading, almost desperate. Michael, you have a sick daughter, don't you? I know you need this job, Nathan said, softening his tone. We can come to an arrangement that benefits us all. Michael felt nauseous, realizing where Nathan was going with this. I won't take a bribe to stay silent about this, Michael stated flatly. It's not a bribe, it's an opportunity for you to secure your daughter's future, Nathan insisted. I can pay for Emily's full treatment, the best doctors, the best hospitals, everything she'll ever need for the rest of her life. The offer was tempting, but Michael knew accepting it would be like selling his soul. My answer is no, Mr. Nathan, Michael said, heading for the door. If you tell anyone about this, I'll make sure you never work in another hospital in New York, Nathan threatened, revealing his true nature. I have enough connections to ruin your career. Michael stopped at the door and turned to face Nathan one last time. Do whatever you want to me, Mr. Nathan, but I won't let you keep mistreating your father, Michael said, and left the room. In the hours that followed, Nathan panicked. He knew Michael was honorable enough to follow through on his threat to expose the situation. He needed to act fast to discredit the nurse before he could speak to anyone. Nathan began spreading lies about Michael among the mansion's staff. He told the housekeeper he'd found medication missing from the supply. He told the gardener Michael had been asking inappropriate questions about the family's finances. He planted doubts about the nurse's true intentions. When Richard woke the next morning, there was already an air of suspicion in the mansion. Nathan had spent the whole night crafting a convincing story about Michael. Father, I need to tell you something very concerning about the nurse, Nathan said, sitting by Richard's bedside. What happened? Asked Richard, still groggy. He's been asking strange questions about our company, our family, our finances, Nathan said with concern. Yesterday he wanted details about your medication and who has access to it. Richard, still under the effects of the previous day's sedatives, couldn't think clearly. Maybe he's just being careful with my treatment, Richard mumbled. Father, he's just a nursing assistant. You don't have the training to question medical treatments, insisted Nathan. I'm starting to think he has ulterior motives in this house. The seed of doubt had been planted. When Michael arrived for work that morning, he immediately sensed something had changed. The other staff greeted him coldly, avoiding conversation. Elizabeth seemed distant and worried. It was when Richard called him aside for a private talk that Michael understood the gravity of the situation. Michael, I need to ask you some questions, Richard said seriously. Some staff have reported unusual behavior from you in this house. Michael felt the ground slip from under his feet. Nathan had gotten ahead of him and turned Richard against him. Mr. Blackwood, may I ask what kind of behavior? Michael asked, trying to stay calm. Questions about our finances, doubts about my medications, excessive interest in the family's personal affairs, Richard listed. It makes me uncomfortable. Michael realized he was in an almost impossible position. If he told the truth about Nathan now, it would seem like he was making excuses or deflecting attention from his own suspicious behavior. Mr. Blackwood, my questions about medications are part of my normal duties as a nurse, Michael explained. I need to understand the full medical history to provide the best possible care. I understand that, Michael, but you're a nursing assistant, not a doctor, Richard said, repeating Nathan's exact words. Perhaps you're overstepping your responsibilities. Michael felt Richard's trust slipping away quickly. He knew Nathan had played his cards well, creating a situation where any accusation Michael made would seem like a desperate attempt to defend himself. Mr. Blackwood, I can assure you my only concern is your well-being, Michael said sincerely. I want to believe that, Michael. But I'll need a few days to think about this situation, Richard replied. Please continue your work as usual in the meantime. Michael left the conversation knowing his time was running out. Nathan had successfully turned the situation in his favor, and now Michael was being cast as the villain of the story. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. Over the next 3 days, the tension in the Blackwood mansion was palpable. Michael continued to perform his duties professionally, but noticed he was under constant scrutiny. Nathan had created an atmosphere of suspicion where every move Michael made seemed questionable. Elizabeth, meanwhile, was visibly troubled by the whole situation. She had known Michael for years and trusted his integrity, but Nathan's accusations seemed consistent and detailed. She was torn between her gratitude for the man who had saved her life and her loyalty to her son. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, everything changed drastically. Michael was organizing Richard's medications when he heard screams from downstairs. It was Elizabeth's voice, clearly in distress. Michael rushed down the stairs and found chaos in the main room. Richard was on the floor, suffering another violent seizure. Elizabeth knelt beside him, completely frantic, while Nathan stood a few feet back, seemingly frozen. "Michael, thank God you're here!" Elizabeth cried. "He started seizing out of nowhere." Michael immediately knelt beside Richard and began emergency procedures. But something was different this time. The seizure was more violent, more prolonged than before. Richard was in real danger. "Someone call an ambulance, now!" shouted Michael, restraining Richard's movements. "I already did," replied Elizabeth, tears in her eyes. Michael looked at Nathan, who remained motionless, and saw something unsettling in his expression. It wasn't despair or fear, as one would naturally expect from a son witnessing his father's suffering. It was something closer to coldness, almost as if he were waiting for a specific outcome. It was at that moment Michael made a decision that would change everything. Against all medical protocols, against his own professional safety, he decided to break confidentiality and tell Elizabeth the truth. "Mrs. Blackwood, I need to speak with you about something very important," said Michael, still managing Richard's episode. "Your husband isn't having natural episodes. Someone is deliberately causing this." Elizabeth stopped crying and stared directly at Michael. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I saw Nathan putting substances in your husband's water," said Michael, knowing he was risking everything with this revelation. "He's poisoning his own father to force him to sign business documents." The silence that followed was deafening. Elizabeth looked at Nathan, who had gone completely pale. For a few seconds, time seemed to stand still. "That's a lie," Nathan finally shouted. "He's making this up to get out of the accusations. He's a fraud trying to take advantage of our family." But Elizabeth knew her son too well and noticed something in his reaction that made her question. The desperation in Nathan's voice seemed more about fear of being caught than genuine outrage. "Nathan, look me in the eyes and tell me this isn't true," said Elizabeth, standing up and walking toward her son. "Mom, how can you believe this stranger over your own son?" Nathan shot back, avoiding direct eye contact. Just then, the ambulance arrived. The paramedics took over Richard's care. He had stabilized but was still unconscious. Michael followed the procedure and relayed all relevant medical information to the team. At the hospital, while Richard was being examined by the doctors, Elizabeth had time to process everything that had happened. She began connecting dots she had never considered before. The episodes always occurred after Nathan visited his father, the business documents that mysteriously appeared signed, her son's insistence that Richard avoid seeing doctors. When the attending physician came to update her on Richard's condition, Elizabeth asked specific questions about the symptoms. "Doctor, could these episodes be caused by an external substance?" she asked. "It's certainly possible. We'll run a full toxicology screen to investigate," the doctor replied. "If there's any suspicion of poisoning, it's important to let us know immediately." Elizabeth glanced at Michael, who was sitting in a chair in the hallway, visibly exhausted. She made a decision that would alter the course of everything. "Doctor, we have reason to suspect my husband may be deliberately poisoned," said Elizabeth, ignoring Nathan's desperate look. The next few hours were filled with intense investigation. Doctors collected blood, urine, and hair samples from Richard for detailed analysis. Elizabeth provided information about his medications and episodes of mental confusion. While waiting for the results, she stepped aside with Michael for a private conversation. "Michael, I need to know every detail of what you saw," Elizabeth said firmly. Michael told her everything, from his initial suspicion about the medication switch to the moment he witnessed Nathan tampering with his father's water. He described the threats he'd received and the attempted bribery. "Why did you wait so long to tell me this?" asked Elizabeth. Because I was being blackmailed, confessed Michael. Nathan threatened to destroy my career and knew I needed the job to treat my daughter. But when I saw your husband in real danger, I couldn't stay silent any longer. Elizabeth felt a mix of gratitude and outrage. Gratitude that Michael had finally spoken the truth, and outrage at discovering her own son was capable of such cruelty. The toxicology results came in the next day and confirmed Michael's suspicions. Richard had been systematically poisoned with a combination of sedatives and psychoactive drugs in doses that caused mental confusion without immediate risk of death. The doctor explained that the poisoning had been done intelligently, using substances that produced symptoms similar to certain natural neurological conditions. Whoever was behind this had medical knowledge or had extensively researched the effects of the drugs. Confronted with irrefutable medical evidence, Nathan finally broke down. In a conversation with Elizabeth and Michael in the doctor's presence, he admitted everything he had done. "I didn't want to hurt him," Nathan sobbed. "I just wanted him to sign the company transfer documents. Dad is getting older, making bad decisions that could bankrupt the company." "What bad decisions?" Elizabeth asked, horrified. "He wants to donate half the family fortune to charity," Nathan shouted. "Don't you see that'll destroy the company's future, our family's future?" Elizabeth was stunned. She hadn't known Richard was planning large-scale donations, but more than that, she couldn't fathom how her son could see that as justification for poisoning his own father. "Nathan, your father has every right to do what he wants with his money," Elizabeth said indignantly. "How could you do something like this?" "You don't understand the pressure I'm under," Nathan shot back. "My whole life I've been groomed to take over the company. I studied business, got an MBA, worked abroad for experience, and now he wants to throw it all away over some senile burst of generosity." Michael listened to the confession with a mix of sadness and anger. Before him stood a privileged young man who had tried to destroy his own family out of greed, a stark contrast to his own daughter Emily, who, despite her illness, had a kindness and generosity Nathan had never shown. "Mr. Nathan, your father isn't senile," Michael finally said. "He's a lucid man who wants to use his wealth to help others. You tried to take that from him with violence and lies." Nathan glared at Michael with pure hatred. "And you?" Nathan lashed out. "You act all righteous, but you were willing to stay silent in exchange for money for your daughter. You're not so different from me." The accusation struck Michael like a knife, because there was a sliver of truth in it. For a moment he had considered staying silent to protect Emily, but there was a fundamental difference between them. "You're right that I thought about staying quiet," Michael admitted. "But the difference is, I would never harm another person to get what I want. You poisoned your own father. I could never do something like that." Michael's words hung in the hospital room, creating an uncomfortable silence. Nathan realized he had lost his mother's support entirely, and his true nature had been laid bare. When Richard regained consciousness the next day, Elizabeth told him everything. The businessman fell silent for long minutes, processing that his own son had tried to poison him. "Where is Nathan now?" Richard asked weakly. "He escaped in the early hours of the morning," Elizabeth replied. "He left a letter confessing everything and asking for forgiveness." Richard closed his eyes and sighed deeply. When he opened them again, there was a steely determination in his gaze. "Michael, you saved my life twice," Richard said. "First on the street, then here at the hospital. I need to ask for your forgiveness for what I did to you." "Mr. Blackwood, you don't need to apologize for anything," Michael responded. "You were being manipulated by your own son." "It's not just that," Richard said. "I humiliated you on the street that day. I laughed at you, disrespected you, judged you for your financial situation. That was unforgivable." Michael was surprised Richard remembered their first encounter in such detail. "Mr. Blackwood, that's all in the past now," Michael said generously. "It's not in the past for me," Richard insisted. "I need to do something to make up for not just the humiliation, but everything you've done for my family." In the weeks that followed, Richard made a full recovery. The doctors confirmed there were no lasting effects from the poisoning, and soon he was back to his normal work routine. But something fundamental had shifted in his outlook on life. The first step Richard took was to publicly apologize to Michael. He gathered all the company's employees and told the full story. from the humiliation on the street to the revelations about Nathan. He apologized not just for his own actions, but for the corporate culture he had fostered, built on arrogance and disdain for people from different social classes. The speech had a profound impact on the entire company. Many employees had witnessed similar episodes of humiliation from Richard over the years, and seeing him publicly own his mistakes marked a radical change. His second step was to establish a healthcare fund for the company's low-income employees. Richard allocated a significant sum to ensure no employee would ever go without proper medical treatment due to financial hardship. Michael suggested converting part of the mansion into a community clinic, offering free care to locals. Elizabeth loved the idea and decided to come out of retirement to practice again. Emily, Michael's daughter, was the first beneficiary of the new healthcare system. She received full treatment at New York's finest private hospital, with all costs covered by the company. For the first time in years, Michael could sleep peacefully knowing his daughter was getting the care she needed. But the most significant transformation was in the relationship between Richard and Michael. The businessman offered Michael the position of company health manager, overseeing all employee wellness programs. It was a role of great responsibility and trust, allowing Michael to apply his medical expertise on a much larger scale. Michael accepted the job but kept his volunteer work at the public hospital. He didn't want to lose direct contact with patients, which he saw as the heart of his calling. The following months brought deep changes for everyone involved. Richard's company became a model for employee care, attracting talented professionals who valued a humane work environment. Former employees who had once been humiliated by Richard began visiting the community clinic. Michael welcomed them without judgment, offering not just medical treatment, but also emotional healing for old wounds. Richard, in turn, began personally visiting every department in the company, speaking with employees at all levels. He learned names, heard personal stories, and understood the struggles each person faced. The arrogance that had defined him for decades was gradually replaced by genuine empathy. Michael's bicycle, which had initially been the target of mockery, was refurbished with modern equipment and became a symbol of the company. Richard had bike racks installed at all locations and created incentives for employees who chose sustainable transportation. In executive meetings, Richard often recounted the story of his encounter with Michael as a lesson in humility and the importance of not judging people by their appearance or social status. The narrative became part of the corporate culture, remembered whenever someone displayed prejudiced attitudes. 6 months after the events at the hospital, Nathan finally returned to New York. He had spent that time in an emotional rehabilitation clinic, undergoing intensive therapy to address his issues with greed and manipulation. The return wasn't easy. Nathan knew he had completely lost his family's trust, and that it would take a long time and effort to earn back even a shred of respect. Richard set strict conditions for accepting his son back. Nathan would have to work as a volunteer at the community clinic for at least a year, unpaid and under Michael's direct supervision. The arrangement was humiliating for someone accustomed to a life of privilege, but Nathan accepted. He knew it was his only chance to rebuild his relationship with his family. Michael intervened on Nathan's behalf with Richard, arguing that everyone deserves a second chance. It was a gesture that surprised everyone, considering Nathan had tried to destroy Michael's career and emotionally blackmail him. "Why are you defending him?" Elizabeth asked Michael. "After everything he did to you and our family?" "Because I've learned something very important these past few months," Michael replied. "Hatred and resentment only create more suffering. If we want people to change, we have to give them opportunities to do so." Michael's wisdom deeply impressed the entire Blackwood family. Nathan, in particular, was stunned to discover that the man he had tried to ruin was now advocating for his rehabilitation. Nathan's volunteer work at the community clinic was a transformative experience. For the first time in his life, he interacted directly with people facing real hardships, serious health issues, lack of basic resources. He began to understand the reality he had always ignored from his privileged position. Michael supervised Nathan's work with patience and firmness, never letting him slack off, but also acknowledging his genuine progress. Gradually, a relationship of mutual respect developed between them. A year after this journey began, the local community's perception of the Blackwood family had completely changed. Richard, once seen as an arrogant and insensitive businessman, was now respected for his generosity and genuine humility. The community clinic served hundreds of people each month, offering everything from basic checkups to specialized treatments. Elizabeth rediscovered herself as a doctor, finding in community medicine a fulfillment she had lost during the years she dedicated solely to her family. Michael became a beloved and respected figure, not only in the company, but throughout the entire region. His work went beyond medical care. He had become a counselor, a mediator, a reassuring presence for people going through difficult times. Richard's company flourished like never before. The culture of respect and care for employees had created a productive and innovative work environment. The staff turnover had dropped drastically, and the company began attracting the best professionals in the market. Emily, now 16 and fully recovered, had become a determined young woman eager to follow in her father's footsteps in healthcare. She studied diligently to take the medical school entrance exams, inspired by the values of solidarity and care for others that Michael had taught her. On the second anniversary of the initial incident on Fifth Avenue, Richard organized a special ceremony. A new pediatric wing was inaugurated at the community clinic, dedicated specifically to serving underprivileged children in the area. To symbolize the transformation in their lives, Richard and Michael arrived at the ceremony riding bicycles together. The businessman had gotten rid of his limousine and adopted the bicycle as his preferred mode of transportation, not just for environmental reasons, but as a constant reminder of the lesson in humility he had learned. Emily, now completely healthy and radiant, was invited to cut the ribbon for the new wing. It was a powerful symbolic moment. The girl who had once benefited from others' generosity was now helping to open a space that would benefit other children in similar situations. Michael's speech during the ceremony moved everyone present. 2 years ago, I rode these streets carrying nothing but worries and fear. Fear for my daughter's future. Fear that I wouldn't be able to provide the care she needed. Today I ride these same streets carrying hope and gratitude. I've learned that true wealth isn't in what we possess, but in what we're able to do for one another. Richard also spoke, reflecting on personal transformation and social responsibility. I spent most of my life believing success was measured only by accumulated wealth. Michael taught me that true success is measured by the lives we positively touch, the smiles we create, and the difference we make in the world. But the most emotional moment of the ceremony came when Richard made an unexpected announcement. He revealed that he had named Michael as co-manager of the entire business empire, ensuring that human values would always guide business decisions. "Michael saved my life twice," Richard told the gathered crowd. "First, literally by saving me from seizures. Then he saved me from myself, showing me the kind of person I was becoming. Now I want him to help me save this company, transforming it into an instrument of social well-being." The decision surprised everyone, including Michael himself. He had never imagined that he would emerge from this experience not just with a better job, but as a partner in one of the country's largest business groups. But perhaps the most touching aspect of the entire story was Nathan's transformation. After 2 years working at the community clinic, he had become a completely different person. Arrogance and greed had been replaced by humility and genuine concern for others' well-being. Inspired by the work he saw Michael and Elizabeth doing daily, Nathan decided to study social medicine. He wanted to dedicate his life to bringing medical care to underserved communities, a choice his parents received with pride and surprise. The relationship between Nathan and Michael evolved from antagonism to mutual respect, and finally to a genuine friendship. Michael became a father figure to Nathan, offering guidance and support on his journey of personal change. During the inauguration ceremony, as everyone celebrated, Michael took a moment for private reflection. He looked at Emily playing with other children in the clinic garden, saw Elizabeth tending to patients with the smile she had regained, watched Richard speaking respectfully with staff at all levels, and observed Nathan helping a child in a wheelchair approach the dessert table. He thought about how one terrible morning, when he had been publicly humiliated on Fifth Avenue, had become the most transformative experience of his life. Not only had his financial situation improved dramatically, but his entire perspective on people's capacity for change had expanded. The bicycle that was once mocked now stood parked by the clinic's main entrance with a plaque that read, "Symbol of humility and transformation." Children often climbed on it for photos, unaware that this simple bicycle had been the catalyst for one of the most beautiful redemption stories the area had ever witnessed. At the end of the ceremony, as everyone prepared to leave, Richard approached Michael for a final conversation. "Michael, I know you could have let me die at that traffic light," Richard said. "After how I treated you, it would have been understandable if you'd just walked away." "Mr. Richard, I could never do that," Michael replied. "It's not about what you did or didn't deserve. It's about who I choose to be. And that choice is exactly what changed our lives forever," Richard said, shaking Michael's hand with genuine gratitude. As they pedaled home together at the end of that special day, Michael and Richard represented more than just two people who had overcome social differences. They symbolized the possibility of transformation, the strength of forgiveness, and the power of kindness to change not just individual lives but entire communities. Michael's daughter, now healthy and full of dreams, rode beside them on a new bicycle Richard had gifted her. The three formed a powerful image: the businessman who learned humility, the nurse who taught compassion, and the girl who represented hope for a better future. United by the bicycle that once divided them, they had proven that true power lies not in money or social status, but in the ability to see humanity in every person and the courage to do what's right, even when it requires personal sacrifice. The community around them had been transformed not by grand investments or ambitious projects, but by the genuine change of heart in people willing to acknowledge their mistakes and work to make amends. It was a lesson in how small acts of kindness can create ripples of change that spread far beyond what we can imagine. And so what began as a chance encounter at a Fifth Avenue traffic light became a redemption story that would be told for generations, a reminder that it's never too late to change, never impossible to forgive, and that true wealth always lies in the ability to do good for others. The end. What an incredible story we've just shared. Now we'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you believe people can truly change the way Richard did? Have you witnessed transformations like this in real life? Share your experiences in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories.